Shut up and sit down.
Welcome once again to the Shite podcast show. I'm your host Mark Kearns with you on episode 104 on the Shite podcast show, and it is all about mixed martial arts on today's show. We are going to go to UFC over the weekend. I think it was 240, was it? Maybe it was 238. I think it's 238. I've forgotten what pay-per-view it actually is, but I know who's on it anyway. So we'll be talking about that coming up on the show. Not a great start to the show, but yeah, we're going through the Max Holloway, Frankie Edgar. What's the next for both fighters? We'll also be going through Cyborg and Spencer, as well as looking at a few fights coming up in the near future. So a lot to get through, a little bit of news as well, all the latest news of mixed martial arts as well to come out on the show. So that's all coming up on today's episode of the Shy Talk podcast show's MMA, I think we'll call it MMA news. And yeah, I'll actually start off with UFC just gone by, and yeah, main evented by Frankie Edgar versus Max Holloway. Decision win for Max Holloway. He said after the fight that he wanted to prove to himself that he can go 5 rounds, and he was happy enough with the decision. So he wasn't overly looking for the finish Frankie Edgar. And also interesting enough, Alexander Volkan Ozdemir thinks that he should have been on the card of UFC 240. He thinks he should have been the one fighting, not Frankie Edgar. He's actually, interesting enough, the same height as Frankie Edgar, and he thinks him and Frankie have a very similar style, just that he carries a bit more power than Frankie, and he's just a little bit more explosive, and believes that he can take Max Holloway down, which I thought was quite interesting. He definitely is next on the line in terms of opponents for Max Holloway. Interesting enough, even though Max Holloway did say he literally would fight at heavyweight if the UFC wanted him to, since then he's kind of focused himself on featherweight. He doesn't seem to be like clamoring to get back up at lightweight, so we might see him stay put at featherweight for a while. You wonder what his kind of situation would be in terms of, would he want to have a few more fights at lightweight, kind of try to build his reputation up, and maybe lower down the top 10 of the lightweight rankings. Certainly the UFC wants to keep him there. They don't want a losing champion. They don't want a guy that every time he goes up to lightweight he loses, or he's only hanging in there with like the top 7 in the lightweight, because top 7 is a murderous row. Like in any other division, they would be probably in the top 3, but it's so stacked at lightweight currently in the UFC, as it's been for the last 15 years. It's always been a stacked division that it's just a pool of killers, and yeah, you don't know. Max Holloway would have a lot of hard fights in the top 10, lower rankings in the top 10. So that was kind of interesting that he said, I'm actually quite happy. Loads of people in the featherweight coming up, like Alexander Volkan Ozdemir, who will challenge obviously next. And then you have Zabib, who I think is also a secret killer coming up through the ranks. And Max Holloway could wait a little bit while. He's not calling out Zabib for a very good reason. Actually trains with Frankie Edgar as well. So he would have been in the training camp, would have probably watch a lot of footage, trying to maybe mimic the style of Max Holloway for Frankie, in order to give him kind of similar looks. For Frankie Edgar, the calls for him maybe to drop another weight division already came in. Joe Rogan asked him after the fight if he would consider it, but right now he said he's not going to make any decisions. He's going to go home and rest. his Almeida, his coach, has said that he would only really be interested in going to bantamweight if there was a chance of fighting for a title. But in terms of him forcing or him suggesting to Frankie if he wants to go to bantamweight, that decision would solely be up to Frankie Edgar. He is 37. He was a former lightweight champion. He held it for 2 years. He was one of the more dominant champions. Dethroned BJ Penn, which for new MMA fans mightn't sound that impressive, but at the time was a major milestone. Or did he beat? Was he the one that he thrown, or was Gray Maynard? I'm not too sure. I said it so confidently. I think it might have been Gray Maynard that I bet. He definitely fought BJ Penn, and he had 2 fights against BJ Penn, and both of them were razor thin. And then he had he fought Gray Maynard twice as well, and that was a very, very tight fight as well. I think he's won the dethrone BJ Penn. I should have done my homework a little bit more on this one. and dominated for 2 years. I think it was Benson Henderson that dethroned him eventually, and then he went down. Obviously had a classic against Jose Aldo, and like it's been just beaten contender after contender for the last like nearly 10 years at featherweight. I think it was 2008 that he was the lightweight champion. So for him to drop the bantamweight, and he said when he fought lightweight, he never cut weight. He was always under the lightweight limit. So featherweight was a natural move for him. But even at featherweight, he never looked too heavy. So I'd say if there is a chance of getting him in a contender spot for that bantamweight title, we might see Frankie moving. But certainly has nothing left to prove in the sport, Frankie Edgar. And decision to continue fighting is all up to him. And it's not one of these fighters that you're kind of hoping retires, because he still looks sharp. He still looks like he can compete with the top guys, even though he has had such a long and historic career fighting the best of the best. Chris Cyborg was back on winning streak on UFC 240 as well, winning 38-27 against Lynn Spencer. And yeah, she looked first round she looked kind of a tiny bit sloppy, but very, very dominant. Felice Spencer was just like so tough. That girl's stock went through the roof after that fight, and like I wouldn't mind seeing her against Holly Holm. I think that'd be a really good fight, really, really interesting. Maybe trying to build her up might be a better thing for her and featherweight division right now, giving Felice a few names for her to fight. But yeah, definitely look absolutely tough. Like came in there unknown pretty much into that fight against Cyborg, who's like historic champion. A lot of people are calling her the greatest female fighter of mixed martial arts fighter of all time. And yeah, she looked, Cyborg, in fairness to her, looked quite, a little bit sloppy, but cleaned herself up. I think she won every round, arguably a 10-8 in the last round. She looked, I just think what made that fight look close was just that Spencer's heart and determination, and she just was ultra tough and just walked down shot after shot. Was able to cut Cyber early, which definitely helped. The blood was kind of as the fight went on, was kind of going in their eyes. But the third round, the cut man kind of got underway. But the big story actually coming out of this wasn't even the fight. It was the last fight on the contract of Chris Cyborg, and she has been kind of back and forth with the UFC in terms of her deal, and UFC kind of made out that she was dodging Amanda Nunes, and as negotiations were going on, and this is kind of been an unfortunate kind of pattern that the UFC has got into when trying to do deals with Chris. She is always kind of thrown under a bus and kind of bewildered, and she's kind of had enough of it. She's kind of saying, until she signs a new deal, she wants a public apology. She doesn't want Dana White to come into the back office and say, look, I'm sorry. She wants Dana White to publicly say, I'm sorry to her. And she will not sign it until she gets a public apology by Dana White. And at the post-fight press conference, Dana White said he doesn't really see what he had to apologize for. So this is all ongoing. Apparently, Chris Cyborg was wearing like Cyborg Nunes 2 t-shirt, trying to build up the hype for Cyborg Nunes. In terms of the women's featherweight division, is the only really fight to make. Chris Cyborg, such a dominant champ, she does deserve. And I guess like if Lee Spencer was the number one contender, because there's only 4 people in the division, so like Holly Holm lost, and yeah, so I think it has to happen. That's the fight people were looking to make for the women's featherweight division. There was actually another news story about the women's bantamweight division. A female professional boxer. I'm not a huge boxing fan, so I just didn't know her. So I'll get her name. Clarissa Shields is her name. She's 9-0 in boxing. She's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, and she's the current and reigning WBA, WBO, WBC, and IBF reigning title holder, as well as the ring title holder at middleweight. And she is looking to go to fight in mixed martial arts. Not only that, she wants to fight in the UFC. She wants to fight Amanda Nunes. And the reason she wants to fight Amanda Nunes is because she's seen a meme. The meme that she's seen just before she turned pro, and it kind of convinced her to turn and become a professional boxer. And she was kind of thinking about going into the world of MMA, the eventually fight Amanda Nunes, and lo and behold, the same meme popped up. And I think the meme it's more of a quote, and I'll see if I have the quote there at hand. And it says, I can't find it. I know the gist of it anyway, so this is not the exact quote. So it basically says, everyone should have a goal that scares them a little. And she's seen it lately when she was thinking about Amanda Nunes, and she said, yeah, I need a new goal, and my new goal should be to fight Amanda Nunes. So she thinks if she fought Amanda Nunes in boxing, that she would have enough power to knock out Amanda Nunes. But she's not like completely off her rocker. She does say that like if her and Amanda Nunes fought today in mixed martial arts contest, that Amanda Nunes would win. So she isn't thinking that she could step in with just her boxing and beat Amanda Nunes, but it is quite interesting. So while we wait for things to unfold with Chris Cyborg and see how much that will kind of play down the line, I'm sure Dana White is going to look to just get this deal done as quick as possible. If it means just publicly apologizing to Chris Cyborg, he isn't known for publicly apologizing to fighters. Actually, he's known for the exact opposite of not apologizing to fighters when he probably should have. But maybe because there's really no other option for right now for the women's featherweight division. He just has to tuck his tail between his legs and apologize for Amanda Nunes. And it isn't that hard. All he has to say is, I'm sorry, I was wrong, and have some way of a plan of making sure that he wouldn't, that all the grievance of not promoting Chris Cyborg properly will be changed. Which, like, will just make the UFC more money if you stop throwing her under the bus. Same with Amanda Nunes. He's thrown Amanda Nunes under the bus several times as well, and there's several other fighters that he's kind of thrown under the bus. And there's no real point. You are harming yourself. Your fighters are your products. When they do well, you do well. Stop hurting your products. So I thought that was interesting. For just that Dana White might be finally backed up against a wall where he has to apologize. He has to say I'm sorry to a fighter, because there's literally no other fighter for Amanda Nunes to fight. And like I could see Chris Cyborg was going, I will go somewhere else if I'm not respected. She's not like, I don't think she's hell bent on getting a title fight against Amanda Nunes. She could just retire, or she could go into boxing. She could do anything really. Like she doesn't have to. Like sign with the UFC. She could just go and try to win a world title at boxing. So that's what all the news I have from UFC 240. On to UFC, I don't know if it's a pay-per-view or it's a fight night. I think it might be a fight night. But it's going to be a headline between Kobe Covington and Robbie Lawler. And it's kind of flying under the radar so it's kind of really interesting fight between, once again, a brawler against a wrestler. We've seen Robbie fight Ben Askren and nearly get a huge win. Slammed Ben Askren really, really hard onto his head, and looks like did fairly well against the wrestler. I know he did lose eventually, but from a bulldog choke. But this is going to be really interesting again. Robbie Lawler is just a fan favorite, and Kobe Covington, to use a professional wrestling term, is the biggest heel going in, I think, definitely at welterweight, but possibly in the UFC. He's possibly the most hated man in the UFC in terms of fighters, which, if you're playing that angle, you're winning. Like, that's his angle. That's Ben Askren's angle. That's a lot of people's angles in the UFC. It was Chael Sonnen's angle for years, of just be hated and people want to see you get bet. For certain people, it's Conor McGregor's angle. Conor McGregor certainly hated. Certainly he's rubbing up people in the wrong way, and it's paying dividends. I really don't know why this fight is happening, because Kobe had won the interim title already, so you would have thought that he was next, and then he was skipped. And now he's fighting. If he loses this fight, he won't get a title shot. He just lost to Robbie Lawler. As well as that, Ben Askren beat Robbie Lawler. So you can't really justify putting Robbie Lawler in just because he bet Kobe Covington, can you? Like, this, Masvidal will win big time in this fight. You could see Masvidal's jumping the queue if Robbie Lawler beats Kobe Covington. And if Kobe Covington, wins, he had something that he's probably already guaranteed. He was an interim title. He was skipped. You imagine he's at least second in the queue now. In fairness to Kobe, other than he wants to keep active, there's no real reason to take this fight. He's everything to lose and only kind of very little to gain, if anything. In other news, BJ Penn is fighting really, really soon, and Dana White has said that win, lose or draw, it will be BJ Penn's last fight in the UFC. He holds the record for the most amount of head strikes in UFC history. That is a record nobody wants to have. His last few fights really haven't been that impressive, in fairness. He was tapped out from a heel hook by Ryan Hall. He was finished pretty spectacularly in his other few fights by knockout. And the UFC really don't want to be giving him any more fights. But apparently, BJ rang Dana White for non-stop for 3 days and will lay down 100 reasons why he deserved to fight. And a lot of fans would be quite concerned about BJ Penn's health if he could realistically pass the medical in order to fight in this fight. But Dana White said, win, lose or draw, no matter what, BJ Penn will not fight again. And when asked if BJ Penn is still under contract after the fight, Dana White said yes. So Dana White mightn't release BJ Penn to fight anywhere else. So this might be it, not only in the UFC but anywhere, because BJ Penn is still under contract by the UFC. He's fighting Nick Lenz, possibly on the 7th of September in Abu Dhabi. BJ Penn, when asked where he would like to fight, he did say Madison Square Garden. But there hasn't been any dates set, so there might be enough wiggle room there for BJ Penn to convince the UFC to put him on the New York card instead of sending him to Abu Dhabi. But certainly a huge star in Abu Dhabi would BJ Penn be. It would make a lot of sense for him. If all things were fair, you'd imagine that they would do a UFC Hawaii and have his last fight in Hawaii. They have enough stars from Hawaii do a UFC Hawaii, but apparently not. Apparently there's no toxin implant for UFC Hawaii, so that's unfortunate for fans from Hawaii as well as for Max Holloway, because like he is, Joe Rogan calls him the greatest featherweight champion of all time. I guess right now you can't really argue with that, and he does deserve to fight in his hometown at least once in his career. He's I like someone call him, he's now become the face of Canadian MMA, which is hilarious. On to something that isn't too hilarious, and it is about Jon Jones. So a radio station, I think it was last week, published KRQE published a report about a battery charge against Jon Jones, stemming from a strip club in Alberta, New Mexico. So, and we're going into any of the details. I think Jon Jones was very quick to react on Twitter, saying, "I definitely not in any trouble, friends. Don't believe everything you read on the internet." And then going out to praise his fans, saying that how grateful he is to have more fans who's praying for his success rather than praying for his downfall, and he's more determined to prove all the haters wrong. So that was kind of hanging over. You kind of wondering, because he's been in this situation before and not come out the best, and he's sometimes just been dreadfully unlucky in his life in the past. We don't know how those performance enhancers got into his system yet, but then there's those metabolites or whatever was the tiny thing that just stayed in his body, that definitely wasn't taken, and yeah, there's a hoo-ha about that. But Dana White has came out after on the UFC 240 press conference and said he's seen a video that leads him to give Jon Jones the benefit of the doubt, and also said that he could be fighting in November in Madison Square Garden. Now, Jon Jones in his tweet said that he's going to be hoping to get back in December. Maybe the dates for New York changed to November, so we could kind of get Jon Jones, Daniel Cormier in November if that all plays out. He's fighting pretty soon, so that gives him enough time to kind of recover and get back into fight camp. You'd imagine December would be, for in terms of Daniel Cormier, would suit him better. Daniel Cormier is actually pushing for now heavyweight, and this might be after Jon Jones' comments saying that he doesn't believe that he would beat Daniel Cormier at heavyweight. So Daniel Cormier has recently said that he'd be more interested at defending his title against Jon Jones at heavyweight. So that'd be quite interesting. This could be just kind of money games, like in terms of signing a deal, or maybe it's kind of just mind games with John Jones. But it's definitely interesting. Also could be just that Daniel Cormier does not want to cut the weight. It's a lot of weight for Daniel Cormier to cut, and it isn't something that he wants to put his body through. So I don't know. I think it's probably going to be mind games with Daniel Cormier, and that's why he kind of put that out there. And finally, our final story is Conor McGregor. So he apparently wanted to fight Masvidal. Imagine that fight actually went, and Robbie Lawler bet Kofi Covington and Conor McGregor bet Masvidal. Conor McGregor somehow became the number one contender for the welterweight title. I know we are living now in fantasy land, but he's quite pissed off with Dana White for his reasons why he doesn't think that'd be a good idea. And Dana White basically says Masvidal's too big for Conor, and apparently that really pissed Conor off, and he isn't quite happy with the president of the UFC. And so he is looking to fight soon, Dana White said. They are constantly in talks about fighting, and saying Conor McGregor is motivated to fight. So he's apparently looking not to go into lightweight, maybe go to welterweight, because he's eyeing up people like Masvidal. But I think Ben Askren, personally, would be an interesting fight for Conor McGregor. A lot of people say he needs to build up his character again. He needs to kind of a pick-me-up fight for him, and people are assessing Donald Cerrone, which would be interesting. Conor McGregor, he doesn't do kind of like build-me-up fights. I think his ego is such that like he thinks he's the greatest fighter of all time. So I don't think a build-me-up fight would motivate Conor McGregor in the way that he come out guns blazing and really getting motivated to get back in the octagon. You kind of need to put a challenge in front of him. So maybe not Don Cerrone, but like I think if Dustin Poirier loses against Khabib, I think Dustin Conor too, it's very sellable of a fight to do. So I think maybe that could be also another option for Conor. But definitely Ben Askren will be really, really interesting. The shit talk and the build up to the fight alone will be worth. And of course, Nate Diaz 3, that will be interesting as well. Like that, you could even do for the 165 title. You could create a title. Then Khabib instantly wants to fight for that title. Anyway, I am now shy talking, so I'll stop myself there. It only took me 104 episodes to do that, to stop when I start shy talking. But I'll be back next Thursday with another show. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next Thursday.
Shut up and sit down.